So, Dr. Davenport, thank you very much for joining us. Maybe you could tell us a little about the context of the CCA's report and some of its major findings.
It's a great pleasure to be here to launch the CCA report on research integrity. I'm at an outstanding conference, the Canadian Science Policy Conference, which gathers leaders in science policy from the universities across Canada, from government and from the private sector. So I'm delighted to be here to launch this important report among such a distinguished group. In 2009, the Minister of Industry asked the Canadian Council of Academies to look into the issues surrounding research integrity and to do an assessment of Canada's research integrity system. It is the result of that charge that we're announcing today in our report on research integrity. We assembled an outstanding group of 14 experts in the field, people from the universities, including 3 vice presidents of research and a number of faculty, journalists who've been involved in the field, and others with a background in research integrity, including one person from the United States and one from Europe. So we had a very knowledgeable group. They first identified what they saw as the gaps in our current research integrity system. And those gaps included the lack of a system-wide approach, the fact that the various actors in the system, and we identify them as the individual researchers, as the institutions, universities and hospitals for the most part, the Tri-Council in Ottawa, the other sources of federal funding, the governments of the provinces who fund us so generously, and finally private sector funders, that all those actors who are doing research, managing it, and funding it, were not working effectively together. And if there's one theme that our report has, it's that we need to address research integrity with a system-wide approach. We also found gaps in the gathering of information, the management of information, research on research integrity, and dissemination of findings in the area. We don't have a good information management system. We found a big gap in education. We're not doing enough in the institutions to educate faculty and students about research integrity. So all of those constituted the gaps that we sought to fill with our report. We are suggesting that we will not meet our expectations in research integrity without that system-wide approach. And we're appealing to all those major actors to get together on the big questions. We know that there is no tolerance today for the mismanagement of public funds in any area. We're no different from anyone else, and we want to be seen as a shining light with regard to the proper usage of public funds. And any breach in that proper use undermines the ability of governments and others to use research in public policy. And that's a key issue that the report underlines. If you're going to use research to make public policy, whether it's for human health or agriculture or climate issues, whatever they are, you've got to trust it, you've got to believe in it. So we spend a lot of time on that issue of how can we make sure that our research is conducted in a way that furthers public trust. We propose with regard to the issue of education and training that Canada needs a new entity. We call that entity the Canadian Council on Research Integrity. And we suggest that the CCRI would have a lead role, first and foremost, in providing advice to individuals and institutions about research integrity. Where do you go when you have a question? Sometimes it's easier to go outside than to ask someone in your own institution. Or it may be an institutional leader who needs advice, and the CCRI is going to be would be a nice, safe place to go. CCRI would also take the lead in advising universities on education programs, in encouraging them to expand those programs. What works and what doesn't in educating people about research integrity? What are the best techniques to reach out to faculty who are already very, very busy? We see CCRI also as collecting information and disseminating it in a confidential way in order to provide information to everyone on what are the key issues in research integrity, how frequently are the universities seeing cases, how can we improve the way we handle them. So in a wide variety of areas, we see this CCRI as playing a key role. The Tri-Council, the three major granting councils in Ottawa, would continue with their current roles. They're at the heart of this system. They set the rules, and ultimately they're responsible for enforcing those rules when there are major breaches. So we would not in any way want to undermine their very fine efforts. In fact, we want to strengthen them with the CCRI. So the Tri-Council would continue to set the rules of the game and ultimately, along with the universities, evaluate whether or not a breach has occurred, and if it has, what the penalty should be. In broad strokes, that's our report. And the major conclusions are we need a system-wide approach with all the major actors working together. We need to do a much better job in education and training with regard to research integrity. And we need a new entity to help coordinate best practices with the university. And we're calling that new entity the Canadian Council on Research Integrity.